what would dictate you to put a camera on something anywhere between 2 to 10 cameras? How selective are you at what crossings you want to put a camera on? Because when you go out there, there's deer in the deep south. We have a lot of deer wherever you're at. But how are you dictating exactly which ones you want to put cameras on, and how often are you moving them, or were you moving them?
Well, if you were to go to put cameras out right now, the food sources are going to be totally different than what they're going to be come time to hunt. Now, mid September, it's going to start, the acorns, the water oaks are going to start dropping, stuff like that. So then you can really hone in on it. But if I was to go to put a camera out right now, I would try to identify why the deer are crossing in this particular spot right now. And there's many times where you'll see bedding up here, like cut over, whatever, thicket, cane break, whatever. They're coming down and you won't see any tracks going up the other side because they're specifically using that spot for water. That's a great spot, especially for our, mid-September velvet season that we have. That's a great thing to kind of hone in on because it's probably not going to be much different climate-wise then as it is now. So if I find a spot like that, I'm definitely putting a camera on it. And a lot of times it's just does. It'll be some young bucks come in and drink water, but it's more of a community, easy to get down the bank, stuff like that. If I'm going down a creek bank and there's a crossing every 30, 40, 50 yards, that's going to be in a spot that's a long stretch straight away. And that's going to be hard to work out, kind of piece apart, because you're going to have to put a camera on every spot to see what's going on. Those deer this time of year in the evenings at night, they're still crossing those creeks, back and forth. They'll go to bed and spend 3 hours over there and come back across. And then they'll stay over here a little while and then they'll cross 30 yards down. There's no rhyme or reason. They're just wandering because they got nothing better to do this time of year. But the spots that I really like is a creek that kind of snakes through the woods, because then you're going to end up with those outer banks are going to have deeper holes that might not be 2 feet deeper, might not be 3 feet in all, but the front side of that's typically going to be a little bit shallower than the back end of it. From the up current side of that bend, generally speaking, is shallower. And you'll see sometimes they may come down that bend and work that back down the creek bank towards that shallower end, and they'll cross and go back up, which makes it hard to hunt. They're so variable, the creek crossings. I mean, we got the Tom Bigby River channel out here, and every year, multiple times, I'll see bucks just swimming the river outside of the rut. Who knows why they're going there? They may be just transitioning from like a summer pattern to a fall pattern or area that they're in. They've been eating on, maple leaves and wild flowers and honeysuckle or whatever it is over here, and then that runs dry. So they know over here on this block it's a bunch of oaks and clover and stuff like that. So it's hard to say without getting out there and just implementing the cameras and putting them into play. And then once you've identified a buck you want, see how regular you're getting him, and then go from there as far as backtracking him.
So, and when we're talking about backtracking, so if a listener or a viewer goes out and they implement this, and again, they start focusing on these creek crossings, summertime, early fall before season comes in, they start catching some bucks on camera. Well, if they don't catch bucks on camera, are you moving them like once a week if you get a chance to get out there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Back then, now I don't hardly run cameras.
Yeah.
But back then, if I'm running, I'm checking them every week.
Okay.
And the good thing about running a creek is you're in the water the whole time. Whether you're in a kayak or you're just wading the creek, it might be, ankle deep water. This time of year is perfect because I can wear some water shoes or some deck boots or something and just walk down. The water's not cold. I'm not worried about getting my feet wet. I just walk. In every crossing, just get up as high as you can, put that camera up there on a tree facing back down at the crossing, and you're not really leaving any scent. Where you start leaving scent is when you start backtracking and branching out of the creek bank itself.
How do you want, I've got more questions, again, talking about what you used to do, kind of staying on that topic. What is your thought process on camera placement on those spots? Like, do you want to have it, 5-10 yards off that crossing, looking perpendicular to the crossing like this, like a T? Or do you want to kind of be looking down the trail a little bit closer? Do you like to hang your cameras real high? Like, what is your thought process on how you used to hang your cameras there?
Set it to where whenever you check it, see when the red light comes on when you're standing in front of it. Set it to where that thing is directly in the bottom of the, pointed down at the crossing itself, and put it on video mode. That way you don't get any blurry pictures of a deer, because sometimes those deer will hit those creeks and they'll just boom, they'll just drop in and come back out. Most of the time they're going to walk, get them some water and come back out. But sometimes those bucks are, how quirky they can be. They just jump down in there and then they're gone to get back out up into the high ground where they can see. So I set them on video mode with it kind of pointed down, and I use those. Moultrie makes a screw-in thing. It looks like a bow hook, but it's got a screw on the top of it to where you screw the camera on. And I would get those, and that way you stick it in and get about 4 or 5 threads deep and just bend it down to where it won't bend the actual screw itself, but it'll kind of bend into the tree. Then once you get it set at the level you want it, screw it on in enough to make it stable.
Land, I'm curious. I'm sorry.
Video mode is best because you're not going to get a good crossing in a week's time may have 50, 60 videos. It's not like, a feeder where you might get 1,000, 1,200 pictures a night or something like that. So,
Land, I'm curious about, with you running this many cameras in the past, and you mentioned how successful you were killing bucks off of these crossings and everything. Over the years of doing that, did you ever notice any patterns that kind of would tip you off to think like, okay, this crossing is one that looks like a mature buck would be using versus all those doe groups? Like you're talking about how 4 or 5 does can just absolutely wallow out a trail versus, the more faint one downstream, maybe that's a buck using it. Is there anything else like that while you're out scouting without even putting a camera out, you just kind of get like a feeling like this looks like a crossing bucks would be using rather than does?
There's not really a whole lot, because sometimes those major crossings will be just an ideal location for the deer to cross. So it might be every deer in that 20 acres up there is using that because they haven't had a reason not to. But when when you get those long straightaways where you've got a bunch of different crossings, that's where you can kind of decipher between a buck crossing, a doe crossing. They're all crossing right there. The problem with those spots is that you may be 3 crossings deep where a buck is crossing, but you've got to contend with everything on down the creek that's crossing. So those are very hard to hunt because you've got to hope like hell that buck is going to come through and cross before anything south of you if you've got a north wind crosses, because they're going to get you. It's going to drop. Your scent's going to drop into that creek bottom and just either swirl around down south of you or just hit the creek and go down. It's an interesting. Those long straightaways are difficult. When you get those S curves and stuff like that, you can manage it a little bit better, and you get more centralized crossings because of that winding creek. But as far as something telling me that this crossing is a buck crossing or one that I want, back then it was either I had him on camera multiple times a week crossing right there, or I had sign up out of it where all that privet is. And bucks love to beat the crap out of some privet or little cedar trees and stuff like typical stuff that grows in the river bottoms and creek bottoms and stuff. If I saw something like that, especially there was one in the past that when you came up out of the creek, both sides, he was just one of those aggressive bucks. And he wasn't even, he would probably be 3 or 4 year old buck, something like that. Nothing special, 120-inch, 8-point, but just a fun deer to kill with a bow. I shoot him with a rifle, to be honest with you. But when you came up out of that creek, both flats on both sides were just destroyed. I mean, it was just privet. It's like he hated trees. He just went in and just destroyed everything. And it kind of went up on both sides. Came out of the creek and it was a little flat in that creek bottom, and then it went on up. And there was no like terrain feature that led the buck into there. All I can figure is that that's just the closest spot to where he was bedding. He found him a little spot in that thicket up there that he liked, and that was his main thoroughfare going to and from early season.